All right. Well, we got the whole gang here, starting with Kaitlyn, who has got the AirTags.
Their tags. So Vice has an article written by Samantha Cole, who we've featured on the podcast before. This is why I like to mention people, because these articles are by people, and sometimes they crop up again and again in our stories, because obviously they have beats. So anyway, so Samantha Cole has another article for us talking about how women are being stalked with Apple AirTags, which seems to be one of the primary uses of these things. And I mean, anyone who has had a lot of experience dealing with intimate partner violence or helping people who have been, in that situation, I'm not going to call them victims because that gets really political really fast, but, people have had boyfriends and even some girlfriends that have taken things too far and become abusive. This is not uncommon. And in fact, it's quite the epidemic in our society. So of course, when Apple releases their AirTags, we now see an uptick, a large uptick of people being stalked using this technology. And yeah, this is and the thing is too, I was thinking, why I was thinking of creating some products to sell on eBay, just hobbyist things. And I'm like, there's not a lot of things to like personally track your stuff, like just a little GPS marker with like a large battery that you can like throw in a bag and track it for like days and days and days at a time. And the first thing that occurred to me was, oh, this is going to get abused. I better not put out this product. Even though I see that there's a legitimate market there, I'm not going to put it out. Now, that thought apparently did not go through Apple's mind at all. They put out these AirTags, and they basically work as like a mesh. So anyone with like another iPhone, another AirTag nearby can like ping and get signals out. And I do want to point out that there is Samantha Cole, the author of the article, is looking for more cases of this and has a phone number on the article to call. So if you think that you have been stalked with AirTags, I recommend calling Samantha and just letting her know so she can collect data and do more articles on this at 1-646-926-1726 or samantha.cole@vice.com. So.
All right. Well, Apple is trying to have some countermeasures against stalking, but apparently they're not really good enough.
They're not. They're not. And I mean, this is, like I said, this is a long time issue. Stalkerware has been a big ecosystem of malware for a long time now. This is just what abusers do when they have access to this kind of stuff.
Yeah. All right. And so Irvin has got robots.
Robots. Robots that are being used in hospitals are being built insecurely. Is that news? I don't think so.
What do they do at the hospital?
They're more like runners to help move things around, like medicine or dropping things off.
I've seen those like waiters. They deliver your food or something.
Yeah, exactly. And the not big surprise for us is they were quite built secure, and it's easy to get into these things.
Yep. That's been like a hacker fiction trope for years, that you trick the medical device into delivering the wrong medicine and kill people.
Yep. It's continuing.
Yep. So hopefully they're patching it. And Liz has got the fun one with John Oliver blackmailing people.
Oh,
yes. This was pretty good. So John Oliver, who hosts a show called Last Week Tonight, this last week focused on data brokers as the topic of the show. And there was an article in Rolling Stone that came out yesterday about the show, and it gave kind of a high level overview of the episode and the way that they kind of went over how data brokers collect consumer data and how they sell and trade it. And one thing that they touched on, which is good because I find that a lot of like, lay people or civilians don't really know about it, is de-anonymization of data, where you can take this quote supposedly sanitized data and essentially use it to reassemble a profile on somebody and determine who they are with just a few data points. And this is very common in the data brokerage industry. It's something we've talked about on the show before, but again, it's not something that a lot of civilians know about. So he broke it down for people and explained how that worked. And then one of the best parts of the episode was at the end, where they revealed that they had purchased some of these anonymized data subsets. And he wasn't very explicit about what was in the data, but they had identified several legislators out of this data set. Because again, it's not super challenging. You don't need to be a renowned cyber sleuth to do this. It happens all the time, every day. And so they haven't released the info yet, but basically they're threatening to do so unless Congress passes legislation on protection of consumer data. So he closed it out with a just a little message to them that if they if they passed it, then he wouldn't be able to do anything with it. So
Yep. Be blackmailing the government.
basically.
Yep. All right. And Alan has conspiracy theories.
Always a popular topic. YouGov, which is one of the more reputable polling outfits these days, in conjunction with The Economist, has a new poll out looking at conspiracy theories. And well, there are some real doozies among the findings. Among them, in response to the statement, quote, regardless of who is officially in charge of the government and other organizations, there is a single group of people who secretly control events and rule the world together. And this is a question they've asked in past surveys as recently as last summer. And would you believe it, the number of respondents who agree with that has risen by 9 percentage points in the space of less than a year.
And
Now,
what is the number?
I don't know what the number is total,
Yeah. All right.
but it's a not insignificant number.
Yep.
Naturally, the people who respond, who agree with that statement, have a favorable view of QAnon and tend to be more conservative. In fact, there's a very, very strong correlation between conservative viewpoints and such beliefs and conspiracies.
Yep.
Some of which is very, very predictable. But interestingly, even though QAnon seems to be very much a fixture on the American commentary scene, a lot of Americans don't actually know much about it. In fact, 34% of all US adult citizens know nothing at all about QAnon, haven't even heard about it. And interestingly, 37% of Republicans say they know nothing about it, whereas only 25% of Democrats know nothing about it, and 32% of Democrats have heard a lot about QAnon, which is in contrast to only 11% of Republicans who have heard a lot about QAnon. So even if a lot of conservatives hold QAnon adjacent or QAnon views, it seems to be the Democrats who are best educated or aware of QAnon.
Well, I think that means the true believers probably don't call it that. That's probably kind of a disparaging term.
Perhaps so. Maybe the brand is damaged, but the fact that they don't even acknowledge ever having heard of it is interesting and quite revealing. But at any rate, the figures are both predictable and scary. Like in response to the question of Americans who say they think that top Democrats are involved in elite child sex trafficking rings, Well, the percent who say that this is probably or definitely true, 2/3 of those who have a favorable view of QAnon believe that. And it's only a little bit lower for people who are very conservative, 60%. And 58% of people who get their news from conservative news websites agree with this statement. So
Yep.
there's a very predictable pattern here. And
The same old thing. That's Rupert Murdoch, right? Essentially.
yeah, well, certainly, yes. Although it's the OAN and Newsmax that seem to be the top conservative fonts for this, if you will.
Well, OAN is pretty much gone.
Yeah, they do seem to be on the way out, don't they?
Yeah, they got strangled, but Newsmax are still around.
Newsmax is very much alive.
All right. Yep. Well, all right. And so I thought this was charming. They have a video of a Ukrainian soldier that dismantled a Russian drone, and it is amazing. It looks like something a high school science team would make with a budget of $50. The camera is just a standard commercial camera, just stuck on with like Velcro. And the fuel tank is just an empty plastic soda bottle with the screw top on. It looks like what I would make from stuff found in a garage. That's the feared Russian drone. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
It does look like something you would make when I see the picture.
Yeah, it's not this classy military thing I'm used to seeing.
It looks like some yogurt containers put together with hot glue and a propeller.
Yeah, but I guess that's all you need. I know the Ukrainians are trashing the Russian tanks with like hobbyist drones that they just sort of stuck like a little hand grenade on and fly over. Anyway, so like you say, presumably we're sending them better weapons now for the Ukrainians, but the Russians seem to be fighting with junk, which is what I hear. I mean, their stuff is not maintained. Their soldiers are not trained. They just seem to sort of be thrown in there unprepared. Anyway, we're back to Kaitlyn, who has something about Donald Trump.
Well, not about Donald Trump. So SciPost has an article written by Mane Kara Yakobian. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced that name. It's talking about prejudice in the United States. And it's looking at the changing dynamics of prejudice. So in general, in America, prejudice has been going down for decades. People are holding less and less prejudiced views. However,
Not lately, I bet.
well, no, including lately. And this is what makes this so interesting. This trend has continued through most of the population to this day. There is one group of people where this does not hold true. In fact, their prejudice has actually gone up, which is Donald Trump supporters. And I want to point out that this has nothing to do with like Democrats or Republicans. Republicans who were not big fans of Donald Trump, and there are a lot of them, also had the same decrease in prejudice.
But Donald Trump supporters have only existed for about 6 years. Is there really enough time to observe a change?
Yes. So there was a series of 13 studies with over 10,000 participants each. So this is a lot of research. And what's going on is we're becoming like two camps in America, where you have, most of America, which is becoming less and less prejudiced. But there is this like small cluster, or actually I should say large clusters, like 30% or 40% of the population, somewhere between 30 and 40%, which is actually sort of going in the opposite direction, they have decided to become more prejudiced, which is not something you want to see, but it's not indicative of America as a whole.
Well, 30 and 40% of the real Americans and the rest of the deep state.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's QAnon all over again. But no, but this is a very interesting phenomenon. Usually these, like I said, these attitudes are pervasive across the whole society. And what's becoming apparent in these studies is that we're becoming sort of two Americas.
Yeah.
Where you have one population with very different fundamental values than the other set of the population. I don't know how to get these two populations talking to each other. And obviously, I'm not a fan of racism. I'm not a fan of prejudice. And so as much as I would like to be like, let's talk and work things out, all I can say is those racist and prejudiced people, they better knock it off. That's not okay.
Well, yeah, but anyway, I know, and I think we can see in this, I mean, and this is everyone's analysis, the general society has been getting more tolerant of gay people and ethnic diversity and religious diversity and stuff. And there's a small core of people that really don't want any of those changes and feel more and more horrified and want to drag us back to 1950. And Trump is the champion of that group.
Maybe that's it. But like I said, it's not that they're staying the same. It's not that the levels of this group is just like, no, we're not going to progress with you. They're actively getting more prejudiced.
Oh, yes. And that's why they're passing all the anti-transgender laws and everything. I mean, they're trying to roll society back to when it was not tolerant of anything basically since the civil rights movement.
Right. But like I said, this is not indicative of America as a whole. This is just a consequence, I suppose, of our climate, where people go into their bubbles, and those bubbles amplify some toxic ideas, I suppose.
Yeah, well, but I think the number of people trying to roll things back is about as big as it was in the previous Civil War. It's about as big as the Confederacy, I think.
I mean, but that's the thing, is that over time, the Confederacy, the people in the Confederacy have become less and less prejudiced.
Right.
This
the ones in
is
cities, yeah.
Yeah. But this is sort of, we're seeing an opposite trend.
Yeah. And the whole world is doing the same thing. Yeah. All right. And so Irvin's got DuckDuckGo.
DuckDuckGo is coming to the Mac as a browser. It's still in beta, but it is coming to the desktops and laptops. Finally, about time.
And why would this be better than like just having Firefox or the DuckDuckGo search engine?
Because DuckDuckGo search engine, and it's supposed to be more privacy based than like Firefox.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we certainly need more privacy.
Yeah, we do.
And Liz has got the one where the San Francisco cops pulled over the self-driving car.
Yeah, this is pretty great. There's video on there's some video floating around Twitter and the internet, which I recommend checking it out if you got a couple minutes, because it's kind of amusing.
Yeah.
These cops in San Francisco attempted to pull over a vehicle because it was driving without its lights on. And when they stopped the car, they realized there's nobody in it. And then you can see them looking at the car and like trying the door handle and sort of trying to figure out what to do. Somebody gets on the phone to call his boss, and then the thing just takes off and drives across the intersection, leaving the cop standing there.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good.
Yep. And supposedly this is legal to have these unattended self-driving cars, and supposedly there's some phone number cops are supposed to call, but at the moment people are confused.
Right. And it is sort of one of those like, okay, well, we're looking into getting a glimpse into our dystopian technocracy of the future.
Yep. All we need is like RoboCop drones flying over, arresting people.
Oh, well,
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
They're working on it.
They are.
And then people like people who will remain nameless will hack them, and hijinks will ensue.
Oh, yeah. All right. And so Alan has got fake news.
Yes, I'm on a QAnon kick today.
Mm-hmm.
Two Duke academics, Kakar and Lawson, have a study being published in the American Psychological Association journal about the psychology of QAnon supporters, or people who believe in conspiracy theories generally. And we've talked about this some before on this podcast, about various academic studies to try to identify what makes somebody more prone to believing in conspiracy theories. Some hypotheses have not really been borne out. Others have. There is a clear correlation between what's called educational attainment, or one's education level, formal education level, and propensity to believe in conspiracy theories. But one of the richer veins of investigation definitely has to be people's psychological makeup. There does seem to be a strong relationship between a person's psychology and their political views. And that certainly holds true for belief in conspiracy theories too, at least according to this study, which involved over 4,600 participants and asked them a number of different questions. And what they found was very interesting, namely that people who score very highly in two personality traits, if you will, also tend to be very, very prone to belief in conspiracy theories. And one of them is what they call, and I have to find this term because I don't want to get this wrong, low conscientiousness conservatives. And the other term is, where is it? If only I could find this because it is so important. Anyway, but low conscientiousness conservatives is a particularly interesting personality trait because what they say is that low conscientiousness is, this is a psychological term. This is a technical term. It's not just something that they make up, but it's it's a tendency to not regulate one's own behavior. So a tendency towards being more impulsive and
the
less
hypocrites.
orderly, which is not what you would generally associate with conservatism, because conservative thought is generally about preserving the status quo. It's much more opposed to change generally. Nevertheless, apparently this is a major component among people who are conservative, and that they have a tendency to believe in these conspiracy theories. Now, there are also, of course, low conscientiousness liberals and moderates too. But interestingly, those people seem to be less interested in conspiracy theories, that it is specifically conservatives who are less conscientious, that are more interested in conspiracy theories.
I see them saying here that the basic thing they had was a desire for chaos. They just think
Yes, and
society
that's
should be burned to the ground.
Yes, thank you. And that's the second component too, is that they have a desire for chaos, and they want to, they agree with the statements such as, I think society should be burned to the ground. And so by sharing false information, the authors believe that this is a way of quote, a vehicle for propagating chaos, which is kind of an interesting, interesting take on it. But I suppose it makes sense too. If you really do believe that the world is corrupt and that Democrats are pedophiles and there is some kind of shadowy conspiracy to control you and the world, then of course you want to burn it all down to the ground. You do want to disrupt society and the economy and the American political system to the greatest degree possible. And I suppose that also makes, that explains why Donald Trump is so attractive too, because everything he's done has been focused around changing the order of American politics and society.
Yeah, I mean, that was his platform. I'm going to drain the swamp. I'm going to go in there like a bull in a china shop and disrupt the established system.
Yeah, exactly. And so since these people who hold this set of views tend to share their views on media platforms, and this is the way that such views get propagated, the authors conclude that there really needs to be a greater effort on the part of social media platforms to crack down on particularly this kind of activity, where they're focusing on low conscientiousness conservatives, not conservatives in general, not Republicans in general, but this particular contingent within the Republican or conservative movement. So
how do you detect low conscientiousness?
Yeah, well, that's Unfortunately, I don't have the text of the survey itself, so I
Yeah.
don't know what questions they asked.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm noticing this dovetails nicely with the political science I saw, where they said America is at high risk of civil war because of our two-party system and first past the gate presidential system, because people only think you should burn everything down when they feel like they are not represented in the government and they cannot get their voice heard. Whereas if you had something like ranked choice voting in a parliamentary system, there would be like 6 political parties, and you would feel like there is a representation of your viewpoint, and you wouldn't feel the need to burn the whole system down.
I don't know about that. I mean, there's so many parliamentary democracies around the world that have shown real weaknesses and either autocratic or undemocratic tendencies. I mean, just in the past week, with Viktor Orban's victory in Hungary, that's a part that Hungary has a parliamentary system, but his party Fidesz has really dominated, and they've managed to strangle the other parties, the 3 or 4 other dominant parties in Hungary. So
Sure, but so according to this analysis, those societies, even though they may be corrupt and such, are at less risk for civil war.
yeah, maybe,
I don't know.
maybe civil war specifically.
Yeah. Which is what we're hearing a lot of the right talking about, how we need to get guns and start a civil war. It's a real
There-
common thing on Fox News and Tucker and all that.
Yeah, it's true. It is alarmingly mainstream now.
And it ties in with this American fascination with guns, which I think there's no other nation like that.
I mean,
Probably not. No.
What's that?
I don't know what we would do, or what I would do anyway, if suddenly there was civil war. I don't have the stomach to fight my neighbors.
Well, that's why my plan to leave.
Yeah,
I don't think I have any interest in staying here and fighting against Americans. I would rather just leave somewhere, go somewhere else.
yeah, no, Canada. I mean, like I'm not picking up arms against my fellow Americans.
Now, if it was like Ukraine and Russia invaded, then I would be inclined to stay and fight. But if it's just Americans killing other Americans, I don't want to have any part of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. If some other country, if Russia decided to bomb us, I'd be like, put me on the front lines. But
Yeah,
when it's Nevada or Utah,
Yeah, I know.
like, no, you're my friends, you're my fellow Americans. Let's get along.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Anyway, so all right, and so there's a report out about In Destroyer 2, which is ICS related malware, and that this was used to shut down energy companies in Ukraine. It's a Russian attack. And what I thought was very interesting about it is the analysis is by ESET, and it is very low tech, very easy to understand. The payload is written as a bash file, just a bash executable script. And it just does incredibly simple things. In fact, they took a module from IDA Pro and repurposed it to make it into a wiper. And it's just a few lines of assembly code, just writing random junk on the master boot record and such. It's very simple, very primitive attacks, but the end result was to detect the systems that were being used to control the energy plants in Ukraine and just destroy them. So they won't even boot up, overwrite all the data with random junk, overwrite the boot record, and then, trash it. And Caddy Wiper, the name of these things, they're just incredibly simple devices, just a simple bash script. So anyway, I was very impressed with the simplicity of it all, and very easy to understand. And that is the much feared Russian cyber war that we were all warned about. They did it to Ukraine and it worked. And they've been hacking Ukraine all along with stuff like this. It does not take super advanced techniques. Anyway, and then back to Kaitlyn has got Finfluencers.
Thanks for waiting. So part of the difficulties of using or doing our podcast at 11 is that I'm also inundated with emergencies at work at the moment.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I have to sometimes switch away. Anyway, so I've been really interested in this guy named Gary V, who is a very popular Finfluencer in the United States. And basically what a Finfluencer is, they are basically people who go on talk circuits and tell everyone how to become rich like them. And it turns out these people absolutely know very little. Most studies show that the most important thing about getting rich is luck. You can be super talented and end up still very poor. You can be super talented and end up putting your talents to more productive uses than getting tons of money. And you can be completely untalented, just be at the right place at the right time, or sometimes a mixture of both.
Are these influencers ever totally broke and just pretending like they have money, or do they
No.
always tend to actually have money?
They tend to actually have money. And this is where it gets very interesting, because these finfluencers, and I include people like Paris Hilton on this. Remember when Hilton went on late night and showed off her
Yeah.
ape?
Yep.
That was sort of her being a finfluencer.
Yeah.
In the sense that she was promoting the NFTs and for people to buy in and invest in stuff that she had personally already invested into.
Yeah.
So she's using her finfluencer status. And this is true with Gary Vee as well. They use their finfluencer status to get followers to buy into things that they're already invested into. So essentially they sort of use their positions to enrich their own power, promising other people riches. But of course, it's more akin to a pyramid scheme or multi-level marketing. And so the Australian government, according to the Insider, and author Wai Yip talks about how Australia is cracking down on this. And they're saying, hey, if you are going to provide financial advice to people, you got to have some credentials behind it. Sort of like if you want to be a lawyer, you sort of have to have pass the bar exam. Also, now if you want to provide financial advice, you also now have to, get a financial advice license type thing, which I'm sure most people can do, but it would at least require most of these finfluencers, to understand ethics, and if they're found, that they're doing things that are unethical, they can get their license taken away. And they'll also go through like basic training at the very least, like basic economic training, which is what you really want. So like Gary Vee, I found it to be and Paris Hilton as well, but Gary Vee, for example, is someone with very little economics background. His father owned a wine business, and he sort of inherited the wine business, and that's where he got his start. So he didn't even go through the process of getting the business up and running. The hardest part about starting a new business is getting it off the ground. He didn't have to go through that. So he just sort of inherited this business, and his big accomplishment was taking the wine business that his father had built and selling some of the wine online. And then recognizing also that that online content is a form of advertising, and getting in on that very early, which is where his whole finfluencer career has come from. Basically, always making videos, always making blog posts, stuff like that. So it's good to see that at least Australia is starting this, and hopefully we'll see this expand throughout the world, because you really should not be giving financial advice unless you really know what you're talking about and can give people good advice that's not going to that you yourself are not going to personally profit from.
Well, this is probably why every blockchain podcast I listen to starts out by saying, nothing we're telling you here is financial advice. Now buy this coin and buy that coin and buy that coin.
Right. So, I mean, that's one way that they're trying to get around it. Hopefully people can close that loophole. Because they're totally giving financial advice. If they're saying buy this, buy that, it's going to be a huge investment. That's financial advice. Telling people what to invest in is financial advice.
Well, they're protected by the same, thin legal cover as Tucker Carlson, who they sued him saying this stuff is all lies. And he said, nobody would take what I say seriously. This is just entertainment. This is not news.
Right.
And that's his official position.
Right. And of course that's a ridiculous position to take, on a news station program presented as the news.
Yeah.
And likewise.
But they can't possibly defend it as news. They defend it as obviously not news, just entertainment.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So, and Irvin has got Tim Cook.
Yes. Tim Cook is going around warning that if if a couple of laws pass and side loading is possible, then it's just gonna ruin everything, and everybody's gonna get scammed, and bad things are gonna happen. Pandora's box will open wide.
So this is Apple defending their 30% fee for being in the Apple Store.
Yeah.
They've been saying that all along, that without them, you'd have howling chaos like the Android store.
Yep.
That might be true to some extent.
A bit, but yeah, he's making more noise about that because there's a couple places where they're fighting, like Europe. Oh, where's the other place that they're currently fighting?
I think here.
Here, kind of, sort of, but there's another country who's pushing harder, other than Europe.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think it's arguably abuse of monopoly power for Apple to charge so much for the App Store to get into the phones. I think that may violate antitrust laws in various nations.
Yep.
All right. And Liz has got mainframes.
Yes, which, all interesting to us, still very useful within the world of business and government.
DEF CON rejected my COBOL workshop last year. Maybe I should try again.
I think you should try again because, I think that a lot of people are missing out on what kind of fun, how much fun there is to be had with a COBOL CTF, because it really is fun. So,
Well, you do have to be kind of nuts, but anyway.
You do have to be kind of nuts. That's true. But in a way, you kind of have to be nuts to get into any of this stuff, right? So you just have to be extra crazy to really enjoy COBOL, but it is fun. It is popular, however, to diss on COBOL these days, and folks do look at mainframes as legacy tech a lot of the time, but there is still compelling use cases for them. And however, IBM jumped on the bandwagon with everyone else, which you'd think of all the companies that might respect their bread and butter for close to 100 years now, it will be them, but no. And it was as a result of a poorly thought out corporate incentivization scheme. It has come out that there have been complaints filed, lawsuits, all kinds of fallout resulting from the way that corporate leadership in IBM essentially misrepresented sales and new accounts in order to divert customers to using cloud resources versus mainframes, among other issues. Really pushing Watson and when telling clients that they couldn't use an on-prem solution when that wasn't true, stuff like that. And this was a problem because it really manipulated the real financial picture of IBM's business at the time, which caused investors to maybe make decisions they might not have otherwise made. So this is a big deal. And one thing I noticed in this was that when I was reading through the article, it referred to complaints made to OSHA, so Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And I wouldn't have thought that some of these things would be OSHA issues, but apparently they are. I would have thought more likely some of these would be things you'd complain to the labor board of the SEC about, even with the some of the ethical stuff and the way it affects stock prices. But they referred to several OSHA complaints where like senior executives got their sales miscategorized, which enriched them in ways that they would not have otherwise been enriched in. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so it looks to me like IBM in fact makes their money by selling mainframes, and they wanted to appear to be more fashionable and trendy, doing something cool like the cloud,
Right.
instead of admitting that they're pushing something that is generally regarded as a fading legacy thing.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
And which, I mean, we see this with other companies too. I don't think IBM has a monopoly on that. It just happened it happened on a larger scale there. And I mean, conditions were ripe for that to be enabled.
Now, see, I think they should just embrace COBOL and be proud of it. But,
You'd think, I mean, considering how they've been the industry leader on that and there's still a need for it, you'd think they'd just double down on that reputation, but not so much.
that's not the way you get buzz. Yeah. All
They're
right.
getting buzz now, but not the kind they want.
Yeah, yeah. All right. And Alan's got Facebook.
Facebook has come out with its quarterly adversarial threat report from the first quarter of 2022, and this dovetails nicely with what I was just talking about, how low conscientiousness conservatives need to be deplatformed from social media platforms. Well, this is Facebook doing their thing to try to deplatform inauthentic behavior, which is what they call
Russian botnet.
fake accounts and botnets and pages and groups that are oftentimes used to manipulate political opinion. And looking through the report, I have to say it is very underwhelming. It's really not such a, I mean, for a platform that has billions of users across the world, this is the best they can do. It's rather insubstantial. Of course, they do address important hotspots such as Russia and Ukraine, and they have done certain things in those countries. For example, in Ukraine, they managed to remove some non-state actors, also some possibly state-aligned actors. They did the same thing in Russia. They also did so in other countries around the world that are seeing an uptick in some kind of conflict, be it Brazil or El Salvador. But given the stakes of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you'd expect them to do a little bit more. What have they done? Well, they've removed 27 Facebook accounts in Russia, 2 pages and 3 groups. Oh, and 4 Instagram accounts.
And they probably come right back the next day with the new account.
That's right. So that's all they've done. Oh, well, that's for accounts touching on both Russia and Ukraine. But in Russia specifically, they removed 3 accounts. 3 accounts.
And I hear all these stories of studies showing that this stuff is in fact very bad for teenagers. Social media, in fact, make them unhappy and tense and miserable and stuff.
Yeah, and but I mean, which is all very, very important, certainly, with body image and Instagram in particular.
Yeah.
But here we're talking about the most high visibility accounts and geopolitical events, and apparently Facebook can be only be bothered to remove a few dozen accounts at a time. I mean, that's really the best they can do.
Well, remember, that's like Frances Haugen and the other whistleblowers. They would hire a team to stop abuse, and the team would just quit after a year saying they don't want to stop abuse. Every time I want to do something, they say, oh no, that would cut revenue. And they just do more of it.
Although at the same time, Facebook has tens of thousands of content moderators around the world. Filtering out usually the most egregious and the most vile content. Clearly criminal content. And so they've got the people, but apparently they lack the sophistication to eliminate accounts that are trying to manipulate political opinion, I guess, which explains why so many clearly racist or sexist or homophobic accounts or accounts pushing genocide, etc., are able to persist on Facebook's platform.
Well, they encourage that because those things get more repeats and shares and make more business. That's
Right,
the thing.
outrage is good for business.
Yes. Yeah. That's why they have a fundamental conflict between their profit model and helping society.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they don't even make much of an effort to pretend that they're actually trying to address these problems,
Right.
despite all the scrutiny they're getting from Congress even.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed how incredibly bad Mark Zuckerberg is at defending his stuff or even having a good image. He doesn't present himself well before Congress. He just
No,
seems to not care at all and not take it seriously.
he really does need some help with his social media presence, frankly.
Yeah. This is the problem with two types of stock. He can never be fired. They can never get rid of him. He is Facebook forever.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like, any other dictator. That's not healthy. All right. And anyway, the last one here is actually good news. There's a new drug which greatly saves you if you have COVID. They give it to people in the hospital. It's like one pill a day for 30 days. What it does is it disrupts the biochemical spreading of COVID through your lung tissues. So it doesn't infect them so much. And they say it lowers the death rate by like 80%. So it sounds bloody awesome. It's just experimental, hasn't been peer reviewed and all that, but it's called sabizabulin. Anyway, but they say it is amazing. It is one of these things where it's so good that they canceled the randomized trial, which happens when it was clearly saving lives. They gave it to the control group also, which is what happens when you have a real medical breakthrough. This stuff is great. So that's a cheerful thought. If they can figure out, prove this stuff really works and hopefully make a lot of it for cheap, it would really be good. A good COVID treatment. So anyway, that's it for today. It being Tuesday, we'll be back on Friday.